Hello and welcome to my first video. Today I'm going to try making some hand printed stickers. Let's get into it. So the materials I used were these dollar store shipping labels, this printing pad, these printing blocks, a carving tool, a pencil, a Sharpie, as well as some packing tape and some masking tape. I started by printing out the designs I want to use so that I could transfer them over to the printing blocks. So the way the transferring process works is by using a pencil and tracing over basically the entire image. You're also going to make sure that you're putting down a decent amount of pressure so that you can get enough of the graphite onto the paper, which will make it easier to transfer to the rubber later. You might have noticed earlier in the video when I was showing the designs that I wanted to use that I had each design numbered. These numbers were to represent the most basic design to the most complex design, and I was originally going to film all of these designs and the process of making them. Unfortunately though, I'm not that good at video making, and all of the videos that I recorded for that one were incredibly low quality and hard to see. So this is the final product of tracing it all over. As you can see in the reflection of the light, you could see the graphite over all of the edges and details that I needed to cover. Next was transferring the design to the printing block. I personally like to use masking tape as it holds the design down so that I don't get double prints. Put the design face down and rub it with anything. I just use my finger and all the graphite should transfer. Now this next step is optional, but personally I like to do it, and that's just going back over your design with some Sharpie. I like to do this step because as I'm carving, I don't want my hand to rub across the rubber and take away the details that are on there from the graphite. The Sharpie just kind of helps lock in those details so you don't have to worry about smudging as you're going through the rest of the process of carving a stamp. You might also notice that the letters here are hollow and empty. That's because I skipped filling them in with the pencil step because I was just going to come back later and fill in those big areas with the Sharpie. So this is the final product with the Sharpie. I like to keep the original image next to me while I'm sharpening because the one on the block is flipped. The next step is the long process of carving out the entire stamp. This particular block is a pretty soft rubber, so it doesn't require much pressure to carve out any of the details. Even so, you still want to be careful with this blade as it can shoot out of the carving. This can rub across the block and ruin it, as well as cutting out some of the essential details of your design. Unlike me, you should also try to avoid cutting towards your hand or your fingers like I am doing right here in the video. These are still sharp tools, and I've gotten plenty of cuts and injuries from these tools slipping out in the past. So just a disclaimer, if you're going to try this at home, please be careful. So this is the final product of the first part of the carving where I carve out the smaller details with a smaller blade. So in order to change the blade itself, the front piece unscrews and the blade itself pops out. In the back is where all the other blades are stored. I decided to go with this tip as the tip itself is wider, but not too wide to where I'm going to lose too much precision. The blade just then goes back to the front and screws tight. So here's some good examples of why precision was still important. I still had some smaller areas such as under the arms and in between a few of the letters that I needed to carve out. I didn't want to risk ruining some of the details. So the rest of the carving here was just all of the background and all of this large negative space in the stamp. Carving out stamps can be pretty tedious and time consuming, but I've always found this art form pretty relaxing and satisfying. With large areas like this one, you're going to want to make sure none of the rubber is sticking up too high because that has the risk of picking up ink. So here's the final product. I've carved out everything except for the design that I transferred onto the block. Alright, the next step is the proofs or the test prints of the stamp itself. And here I wanted to try a couple different methods. So here's the first method, and it's a little bit unconventional. So I decided to try actually pressing the ink pad down onto the stamp. This method is a little more along the lines of something I've done in a printmaking class where you actually would roll the ink onto the stamp. The next thing that I was trying was actually doing the paper on top of the stamp, which is also similar to that of my printmaking class. I used a roll of tape to push the paper down onto the stamp as I would do in a printmaking class. However, in a more professional environment like that, you wouldn't be using a roll of tape and you'd be using a tool more suitable. The print itself wasn't that bad, but for my particular goal, this method just was not going to work out. So for my second test, I went for a more ideal method, and that would be pushing the stamp down onto the ink pad. Here I checked if the ink was covering the entire stamp, and unlike the last test, I decided to put the stamp down onto the paper rather than the other way around. This print turned out much better and was much more even all around. So the next step was correcting the stamp. And I wouldn't normally use a pen here, but I'm just using a pen to demonstrate what I was pointing out and what I was going to be fixing. So here I'm just highlighting some of the things I wanted to fix, such as all the misprints up at the top or around the design, a lot of the double print around the letters, as well as the letter E and the spacing in between. So then it's back to carving, and I'm just cutting out all of the mistakes that I highlighted in the previous step. It's pretty easy to see where the misprints and mistakes happen because parts of the stamp will be covered in ink that weren't originally intended to be printed. I used a smaller blade for most of this step as most of these mistakes were pretty small and in pretty delicate areas of the stamp. And once again, this is the end result after fixing all the corrections, and the next step is to just see how the print comes out again. So once again, got the paper, got the ink pad, pressing the stamp down onto the ink pad. I needed to be careful with the pressure I put down because if I pushed too hard, parts of the rubber were going to push all the way down and collect ink. And you could kind of see that inside the skull and just around the body of the skeleton. And you'll see these mistakes right here in the print. It's still a much better print than the first one, but I gotta be careful with the pressure I put down. So off camera I decided to actually cut off parts of the rubber that weren't being used on either side of the stamp. This will make for a cleaner print and help me disperse pressure where I needed to be. And after rinsing and repeating the last steps, this was the final product. So this is me just going through the other two designs that I had, starting with penciling in all of the design, then transferring it, and then going over with Sharpie. And I actually decided to do the Sharpie for both of the designs on both sides of the stamp before I started any cutting. This was so that both sides of the stamp stayed pretty stable as I was trying to Sharpie on the design, rather than having big chunks cut out and it being wobbly on the surface. I really wasn't sure if this design was going to turn out after cutting it. There was a lot of small details and I just really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to cut all of those details out. Another useful tip is to keep a piece of paper close to you while you're using a Sharpie, as you can see on the top left of the screen. This is because I think drawing on the piece of rubber with the Sharpie dries out the tip of it, and scribbling on a piece of paper helps bring that ink back to the tip of the Sharpie. And this is just me cutting the stamps out. This will be the most time consuming part of this entire process. When designing a stamp, you're not going to be able to get any mid-tones. It's going to be solid print or no print at all. The best way to create the illusion of shadows or shading would be to use either cross-hatching or hatching. And you can kind of see that in some of these stamps, and that's just basically the use of lines, straight lines, that are either crossing or not crossing at all to make a certain part of the stamp darker. I recommend wiping down your surface every once in a while to keep all the debris that comes off the stamp away from your blade. And while the rest of this little montage plays out, I just want to say again, this is my first video, so I do apologize for any choppiness or any low quality edits or anything from the video. While making videos isn't my main focus, I do plan on making much more videos in the future. I'm hoping that these videos can inspire some people or show them that they can do some of this stuff themselves. And after cutting off some excess rubber, this is the final product of both sides of the stamp. And just like the last design, test prints are needed as well as correction cutting. I think both of these designs turned out pretty well and they did not need much correction cutting. I think this was due to the rectangular shape of the stamp, which allowed me to push down pressure and disperse it more evenly across the stamp itself. So with all the stamps made, I pulled out my dollar store shipping labels and decided to try making some stickers. So I started printing these designs onto these shipping labels. I originally thought I was going to be able to put 4 designs on each one, but I was only able to fit 3. So here's the process of me printing it, stamping it onto the ink, and onto the shipping label. During this, I want to try and make sure I keep my fingers clean. You'll see here in a second when I'm printing the 4th design on the 2nd shipping label that my fingerprints are on it, and that's just because I didn't let the ink dry on my hands before I touched it. So here are some basic test prints I did, and since these were test prints, you might notice they're a little bit sloppier. Some of them aren't cut right or they're printed off the edge. I think one of my favorite things about this method though is that each sticker is going to come out completely unique, just like these two seen here. This is an example of the misprint. As you could see, I didn't cut it right and part of the print was off of the paper. So I wanted to do a test. All the stickers in the last clip were all only paper, and I wanted to see how durable it would be if I laminated them with some packing tape. So here I did 3 tests on some different surfaces and different conditions of paper versus the laminated stickers. This first test was dry stickers on a piece of plastic, and I tried peeling them off to see how durable they were. The next surface was cardboard because I thought it would stick better, and they did stick pretty good. The plastic one peeled off really easily and was even able to stick back on. The paper one, however, was almost impossible to peel off without ripping. As you can see here, it's just coming off in pieces. The final test was plastic, but I also ran some water over this to simulate maybe like rain or some type of weather. The paper one absorbed the water instantly and rubbed off really easily. It also bled ink onto my finger. The laminated one also absorbed water through the edges, but the middle stayed pretty dry. The wet edges did make the sticker easier to peel off from the edges, and once the water got in there, it was pretty much over. So I got to printing as many stickers as I could, and I ran into a problem here on this particular stamp. Due to the big indents on the one side of the stamp, it made it harder to put even pressure on the other side of the stamp. I remembered in my printmaking class, the presses that we used had big pieces of fabric across them. I tried putting a t-shirt down to help push the paper up into the stamp when I would press the stamp down. For these two rectangular stamps, I also decided to use my alarm clock to help me evenly put pressure across the entire thing. And here you can see, it turned out pretty good. There's a close-up of it. All of the details came through, and I was off to rinse and repeat that process. And after a while, I had a pretty good stack of printing labels which had hand-printed stickers on them. And after the test earlier, I decided that I wanted to go with the laminated stickers, so the next step was to cut tape and laminate each and every print that I made. And after another long while, I had all of these prints laminated with some tape and ready to be cut out. So, these are the final products here, and after a count, I had a couple hundred stickers total. In all honesty, these stickers really aren't the best quality, but it was definitely a fun project. And that's gonna bring an end to this video. Make sure to like and subscribe down below. I'm gonna link some of my social medias down below. I'll probably be more active on those, so if you want to follow for updates, make sure you check those out too. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.